Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Russ Spencer. I am the Director of Account Management with Craftable. Take a moment, let Edith introduce herself as well.
Hi, all. We're really excited to show you this today. My name is Edith McClelland. I am the VP of Customer Success here at Craftable. We're excited to walk you through your path to profitability through Craftable.
Thanks, Edith. So I'm going to take a moment and share with you a little bit about my background, what brought me here today, and then why you should be looking at your business through the lens of Craftable, not only to protect the existing profits, but also claim the undiscovered profit within your business. So like many of you, I cut my teeth in the industry by starting with the dish pit. My journey started in the summer of '85. So yes, I just aged myself. I worked my way through the industry, working for many large organizations across the Midwest, running multiple restaurants in multiple states at the same time. Now, one thing I can tell you while working for these larger organizations, they might not have the same or lack the passion that you would find in an independent operator when it comes to the quality of food and quality of service. They definitely know how to make money. And that's not necessarily because they bought cheaper groceries all the time, and it's certainly not because they paid less for their labor. Instead, they leveraged their insights and their data. They implemented great SOPs. They held their teams accountable. They identified the opportunities. They drilled in to make smart decisions that drove impact to the bottom line. I always like to compare it to like a chess match, right? So every move on a chessboard has a consequence, good or bad. So what you're doing when you're playing chess is trying to understand that consequence before you make that move and predict the outcome that you have the desired outcome you're looking for. So after 30 years in operations, I moved to the consulting side of the industry in 2015. Started working with small independent operators and small regional chains, replicating many of the same SOPs. In 2019, I bumped into Craftable and I was able to use it as a tool to drive impact fast. My own project I was working on at the time, I was able to move the bottom line by 4 points. So on $4 million, do the math, 4 points, $160,000 to the bottom line. And so COVID hit, right? Ushering in some uncharted times, and leaving our industry reeling in the aftermath. Edith, if you would advance there, let you bump us forward here. So in some cases, we've heard reports as many as 72,000 restaurants closed in 2020 due to COVID. Okay, and we don't need studies to tell us that we're all struggling being short-staffed, okay, or that our cost of goods and our labor are continuously increasing. Okay, we can't offset that fast enough through the menu prices. So what's the result? The results are margins have shrunk significantly. In some cases, 40% of operators claim they didn't even make money in 2023. So where do we start? Many times we got to go back to the basics. I always say, let's slow the game down. Let's access the data. Let's implement those SOPs. Let's hold people accountable. Let's dive in on those opportunities, measure the consequence of our decisions, and then move forward. So that really starts with breaking down the P&L. So Edith, if you would, So let's break down the P&L really quick. If we look at the P&L, there's really 5 buckets we're trying to manage here. The first 3 buckets are what we know as your prime costs, which consist of your food, your bar, your bev, if you will, and your labor. Now, the thing that you need to understand about these costs are variable and they will rise with your sales. Just because you sold more cheeseburgers doesn't mean it costs you less. There are some fixed numbers in there with salaried labor, but for the most part, those numbers continue to rise. On a healthy P&L, we're looking for that number to be somewhere around 55 to 60%. Okay, the next bucket you're looking at is your overhead. Your overhead is actually, some of your costs are variable and some of them are fixed. Okay, but overhead, I always like to define your overhead as everything that is not food, bev, labor. For example, it's napkins, bar stools, chemicals, the landscaper, the trash, electricity, etc. Okay, the neat thing about this cost is this cost typically is pretty easy to quickly identify when it's out of line. It's not perishable, so you can reel it back in. For instance, if you bought too much bleach, don't buy as much. If your electricity bill is high, then look for ways to save it. Turn your fryers on at 10:45, not 9. Have your trash empty 3 times a week, not 5. Okay, but it's pretty easy to reel that number in. On a healthy P&L, we're looking for that number to be somewhere around 16 to 20%. It might fluctuate according to the QSR versus FSR, et cetera. The fifth bucket we're looking at is your CAM. CAM is your common area maintenance, and typically it's your building costs, your taxes on the building, and the insurance on the building. That number is a fixed cost in most cases. There are some variable numbers in there periodically. Okay, but for the most part, that number needs to sit somewhere around 6 to 8% of total sales. If that number's out of line, really the only way to fix it is renegotiate the lease or increase your sales. Okay, so on a healthy P&L, if you're hitting all these benchmarks, you're looking about 10 to 12% in profit. then inflation, right? So now we go back, we talked earlier about the impact that COVID had on our industry with 20% increase on labor, 30% on cost of goods, et cetera. All of a sudden, we're finding our bottom lines are impacted significantly. We've seen our prime costs increase all the way up to 65, 70%, shrinking our margins down to 4.5, 5%. So where do we begin? And again, I think it goes back to looking at, how do we get the prime cost in line? How do we shrink that number? There are a couple ways we can use Craftable to do that. So the first one I want to talk about really quick is managing waste. Studies say that the average restaurant wastes between 4 and 10% of the purchases. So if you think about that, Edith, if you would advance, if you think about that, what happens? Where's that waste going? It's over portioning, sales not being captured, back of the house mistakes, front of the house mistakes, garbage mounting, over ordering, under ordering, not checking in the truck, not rotating the product. So a lot of money being left on the table through the waste. So if we break it down really quick, simple math, if you have a restaurant that does $60,000 a week in sales and they're running a perfect food cost, which they're not, let's just say they're running a 30% cost of goods. That means they would, in a perfect world, spend $18,000 in groceries. If you waste 4% of 18,000, that's $720. If the average restaurant right now is running about 5% profitability, for you to reclaim that 720, you would have to do an additional $14,000 in new revenue. Now, if 14,000 divided by, let's say, a $30 check average means you need 480 guests to reclaim the 4% that was lost on the 18,000. And in many cases, as we stated earlier, you're already understaffed and you need more bodies to execute sales. And we're going after sales. Sometimes it makes more sense to stop and focus on reducing waste. So that's just one example where you can reclaim that and why it's important. The next one would really be driving profitability to your bottom line through menu engineering. A properly engineered menu typically drive anywhere between 2 and 10% of profitability to your bottom line. Now, what I want you to think about here is not every item on the menu contributes the same amount of profit within the section as the next item. For example, I'd much rather sell a ribeye at 40% cost of goods and yield 24% profit or $24 in profit versus selling a cheeseburger at 25 and yielding 8 in profit. I would need 3 cheeseburgers to equal the same as one ribeye. And in many cases, I don't have the labor to go after that. So if I truly understand where my margins are, then I want to understand how to engineer my menu. And when I'm engineering my menu, you're really trying to balance 3 parts here. The first part is you want to identify the items that drive the most profit within this section of that menu. The next part is you want to make sure that you can execute that item. And then the third part is you want to make sure it represents the integrity of your brand. I don't care if an item is profitable. If you can't execute it, the profitability is chewed up in the execution. I don't care if an item is profitable and it's easy to execute. If it doesn't bring the customer back, then it doesn't have contribution of profit for the long term. So it's really about understanding where those margins sit and then making smart decisions, again, thinking through the consequences before designing a menu. And once you understand that, then design a menu that drives profitability. For example, items with pictures will drive about 30% more traffic versus an item without a picture. Keywords of shaded boxes like sustainable, all natural, locally sourced, chef inspired, they'll also drive traffic to an item. Think about what your suggest is selling or what you're running server contests on. How are you leveraging these items to drive profitability? I used to give my employees discounts on items I wanted them to sell because your employees are going to brag about what they eat every day. So what are they going to eat? They're going to eat what makes me money. So when you understand these numbers, you can start making smart decisions about positioning your business to drive that profitability. Now, there are many other ways to actually drive profit using Craftable. I'll let Eve take it over from here and share it with you.
Like, thanks so much for that, Russ. That was a great intro. Let's jump back into Craftable. So the way to really control your costs is going to start with your ordering. So I'm going to jump into a demo environment for you and walk you through how we can do a lot of what Russ has already talked about within Craftable. So one way to control your costs to drive down your costs really is to control your ordering. So you can do that really, really easily on Craftable. One of the things people love about Craftable is the ability to have multiple vendors and multiple purchase units against your items and the ability to then compare who you're buying them from and what they're charging. So I can see here, I've got a taco location here. I go through a lot of limes every single day. So if I go look to order my limes and I click this little plus sign, oh, this is not a good example. Let's get my key lime juice. You can see I buy it from 2 different vendors. I've got Julius Silvered as a vendor and Chef's Warehouse as a vendor, and Craftable is going to flag for you which option is actually the best value here. So you know that you're making the best decision possible for your business, but it's also not forcing you to buy this one. If you know Chef's Warehouse isn't going to come until maybe Friday and you really need this to get delivered tomorrow, you can always make that executive decision to order the slightly more expensive one. But it's helpful to have that information available at your fingertips so you can make those game time decisions about which one you're going to order. And the system will always flag for you whichever one is the best value. So you can see if I wanted to order that, I would just click add to order, and that just puts that into my cart. So that's just one way you can use Craftable to help you. You also, of course, can set up par levels. You can always see your in-stock information so you know exactly what you're using. Certainly, oranges are a popular one with us. You can see it's also going to give you information about how much you've been using. In this case, we actually haven't been using oranges. I think we removed from the menu the item that had oranges. So you can see it's not something I really need to order. Since I last purchased this item, which was yesterday, I guess, or today, we haven't used any. So that makes sense. Same with your avocados. You'll also see if something gets marked out of stock, if you're utilizing our vendor integrations to get your updated your updated pricing information from your vendor. So in this case, you can see with Julia Silver, I actually have vendor catalogs as well as with Sardilli. You can also see exactly when those vendor catalog pricing was last updated. So I can see that currently Julia Silver is actually out of avocados. So maybe I need to pivot and order them from Sardilli's because I need avocados. All of my dishes pretty much have avocados. I'm going to have to get some. So it's really helpful to be able to keep a finger on the pulse of what your vendor's selling, what their pricing is, and make sure that you're ordering things that are going to work for you. Are they going to get here in time? Are they in stock? What's the best price? So all of that is here, and really controlling those costs is a great place to start with making sure that you're not ordering the most expensive item on the system. You also, I know I just showed you how we can get those vendor catalogs to make sure that you're getting the updated pricing. Part of that as well is you can get your vendor invoices sent through from your vendors. You also can just submit the pictures of your invoices to the system so that they get processed, which is really helpful because then you can make sure that you're getting the most like the quickest version of your invoice on here, and everybody has visibility into those pictures if you're submitting them. The act of processing and approving your invoices is going to update all your pricing on the system, which is going to flow through to some of the reports that we'll walk through in just a minute related to controlling your purchases, looking at your variance, as well as your menu engineering reports. So it's really important to process and get those updated pricing via those invoices because the recipe costs will also update as a result of fluctuating prices. So those are just some of the many benefits of Craftable. I'm just going to jump over into the report so we can start to see how we can further get a handle on understanding what our costs are through the data available on the system. So when I like to look at kind of controlling my costs, the first place I like to go is this report here called Actual versus Theoretical COGS by Ops Group. This is a really great high level report. This is going to allow you to select multiple ops groups. So on the food side, I'm just looking at food. On my beverage side, I have beer, wine, liquor, and ABEV. You can also select how you want to actually see the data. Do you look at your sales by net or by gross? I'm going to look by gross just for fun. You can also decide if you want to see that waste included or excluded. So if I select with waste, we'll just run that and you'll be able to see there's a waste column on here. And this really goes back to what Russ was talking about before. It's really, really important to start tracking your waste. So within Craftable, that means logging a depletion of your waste. So Craftable supports the ability to enter waste depletions by item. So if like a whole gallon of milk went off, you can just enter that. We can also enter recipe wasting as well, in case you're making a recipe for R&D or somebody spilled a whole recipe that they were working on. You can just mark that as waste, then the system will calculate what that's costing you. It looks like in this location, we actually didn't have any waste in the last period. So let's just go back a little bit. Apparently we're not doing very much wasting here. Okay, bad example. But you will be able to enter in those depletions to track your waste, and you'll be able to see the cost of those wastes broken out. It's also really helpful for tracking your variance, which we'll look into in a second, because it'll help you understand where things are going. And I'll show you also later on this conversation, but we will also be able to run this report from our director level, which is really helpful if you have multi-unit to be able to see this across all your locations and start drilling down to see, who's who's operating at what cost percentage, what's the variance in their COGS numbers, how much waste do they have across different locations, etc. So again, this is a good high level report. You can run this in Bev or food, whichever it might be. I will just jump over to Bev really so you can get a feel for it there too, because it's neat to see it with the different categories. So again, you can do with or without waste. As you can see it broken out, we've got beer, liquor, wine, and a bev. And so I can see how we're doing in each of those different categories. See my Theo COGS number is quite good on beer. My actual is running very high. So this is a really good indicator to me. Okay, we need to start drilling into our beer. What's going on? Why are our actual COGS numbers so high when our Theo is right where we want it to be? The other ones aren't too far off, 3.7 variance, 4.2, a little higher than normal. I think I should probably take a look at that. But generally speaking, those are within normal. And I definitely should figure out what's going on in beer. And maybe I know why NA Bev is off. Maybe it's getting tracked separately. But so the next step, when you start to sort of notice some of those patterns and issues, you can then drill a little further by going into your actual versus theoretical quantity details report. So I favorited it here, but it also is just stored under that inventory tab. Down here, you've got AVT quantity details. So this is, again, an actual versus theoretical report. You can run it by just items, or in this case, my account uses prep items as well. So you can see your start, your purchases, transfers, all of the depletions as well that are on the system. And so it's going to calculate for you what your actual inventory is. Well, you're telling us what the actual inventory is. And we are calculating for you what your theoretical inventory is supposed to be. And so it's giving you the variance between those two numbers, your actual inventory versus your theoretical inventory. So what I love to do on this report is actually sort by the variance value to kind of rise to the top things that are the most expensive problems I have. Because at the end of the day, you might have a high variance quantity on certain items, but they might be salt packets or just things that really are not very expensive and not moving the needle. By focusing on the high dollar amount items, you can really get to the crux of what's moving things and what's going to impact the bottom line. So you can see my limes are a problem, and then focusing more on the liquor side, I can see my Libelula and my Siete Lucas. Both of these are the most expensive of my problems, especially the Libelula. So I would then from here want to drill down and figure out, hey, what's happening here? Why am I losing so much? Why do I have so much variance on this item? Did I miss an invoice? Did we miscount it on one of the inventories? You want to start drilling in and figuring out where this variance is coming from. Another thing you can do, I'm just going to jump back to food. I'll just go through here. Another thing you can do on the system to keep track and keep sort of, again, your finger on the pulse of what you're spending your money on is looking at the price fluctuations on the system. So to do that, I like to use the price details report, which is actually here under purchases, price details report from the purchases tab of your report. Because at the end of the day, you can't necessarily change the price that you're going to pay at the back door, but you can use the information on here to make informed decisions about what you're going to do with these ingredients. So for instance, you can see if the price of things is changing quite drastically, like it looks like my onions have gone up significantly in price. Maybe I want to start editing some of my recipes and changing how much onion we're putting into certain dishes. Or perhaps telling the team to sort of push different items that might use the lower cost ingredients than a recipe that might suddenly be costing us more. You'll be able to see that as well on the menu engineering report, but this is a really good way to look at it from sort of an item level detail, raw ingredient wise. You also want to make sure that your team is ordering the right SKU of your items. This is a good spot to see that. I can see we paid $2.19 for a pound of yellow onions, whereas historically we've paid 54 cents. Maybe I know, oh, I think that means they bought the organic ones. We're fine using the non-organic ones. You can always drill down by just clicking into that number. And that's actually going to take you directly to that invoice where you bought that. If you've uploaded a picture, you'd be able to see it right there. I don't have a picture for this one. But that can help you sort of look at it and discern, okay, yeah, this SKU, where my onions are, maybe I know that this SKU is actually the organic SKU and we should have gotten the other one. And so you can help kind of control your purchasing by talking to your team and saying, hey, don't buy that one. We always buy the 50 cents per pound item. The other report I just want to show you here is your menu engineering report. And I know Russ talked about this a little bit before. This report is near and dear to all of our hearts. It's actually under recipes. Just going to go look at it. So it's going to load up, and what it's going to show you to start, if we just scroll down, this is showing you all of the data that's coming over from your POS and the recipes that are linked to them. So you could look at all of your POS items, but I like to actually kind of compare things that are really comparable together. So you would know your menu best, but I love to use these little drop down filters down here to look at the information that's sort of like for like comparison. So for instance, I could filter for maybe just my taco packs, or if I know that maybe shrimp is going up in price, I can filter by just typing directly into here just the word shrimp. Then it's gonna pull up all of my different shrimp things down here. And I can either just start checking specific boxes if I want, or I can just select all. And what that would do, and like all was great, let's remove our modifiers since that's a little bit of a different concept there. What this is doing is it's plotting up here on the top on a classic profitability versus popularity graph where each of these items falls in that flow. So you can see here it's heavily, heavily skewed. We've got a ton of items over here at the far, far left, which I really want to look into closer. Then way, way, way at the far right, we've got this little one. So this one's my crispy shrimp dish. And why it's at the far, far right is it means it's exceptionally popular, like way more popular than anything else on here. So it's really helpful for me to know this is very, very popular. But at the same time, it's very low in this chart. So if you're looking at sort of the vertical, it's very low here. This means it's not terribly profitable in comparison to all of these other ones, especially these ones that are showing up above the line. So I need to figure out, okay, if this is a really popular item, what can I do to make it more profitable for me? How can I increase my profit on this item while still maintaining its popularity? So we can play around with that. We can also, if you wanted to drill into these ones over here, you can also start unchecking items if you want to start moving the graph because everything is always displaying in relation to other items on here. So for instance, we know that's the crispy shrimp. And what's this other one that's sort of an outlier? Just the thing called shrimp. So if we remove those two, you'll see it's going to start to replot everything and you can really drill in to look at the breakdown over here of all the different sort of things that we do. So we've got some 8 packs, which are all showing up in this puzzle quadrant. And then down here, we've got sort of new workhorses. What are the new workhorses? RB shrimp, bib, crispy shrimp, and bib shrimp. So all of these are showing up further to the right now that we sort of replotted everything. But at the end of the day, you want to see, okay, my crispy shrimp, that's the thing that everybody loves. What can I do about it? Let's just put that one back on here. Something that's really, really neat about this report is you can tweak some of these numbers. You can see how the quantity, cost, and price numbers all show up in blue. You actually can click directly into those values and change them. So you can see here, where's that? So that's our crispy shrimp right there. If I was to say, okay, it cost me 73 cents to do this, but I'm charging 4.74, but this is a wildly popular item. We're actually going to start charging 5.50 for this taco and see what happens. If I type in here 5.50 and run it, you can see I'm going to make an extra $917 in profit just in that 1 week period of data that we're looking at. So if you extrapolate that out over a month, we're looking at almost $4,000 more in profit just by increasing the price that we're charging on this taco. You can also change things like the quantity or the cost to you to again sort of tweak what's going to happen to the profit. If we were selling a different taco instead, you can change, say, okay, well, what if we push the chili lime shrimp taco instead? You can say, okay, well, that's going to hit 1,200. If we were to sell whatever that was, say almost 100% more, you can see we'd get $1,100 more in profit. So it's a great way to sort of play with your menu and see what would happen if X, and then sort of tweak from there. You can also, of course, change the price. So if you're sort of fluctuating between, okay, if we can change vendors and get the cost of this taco down a little bit, I know that new vendor is going to charge X. That would make my taco cost Y. You can change the cost and see what the net result is going to be for the bottom line. That's what I love to do on this report. Russ, I know you show this report to a lot of people. Is there anything else you would add on this one?
You know what? I would go back, guys, and just think what we talked about earlier. Every choice you have has a consequence. Every choice you make has a consequence. So it's really nice to get in here and measure what's the impact. Okay, if you mistakenly, let's say, move traffic to an item that has less profitability than an item that you're selling that has more profitability, what's the impact? What are you using again? What are you doing in here to actually promote those items? And the last thing I would tell you that this report's very helpful for is understanding the average profit of an item in a category as well. Okay, so if every time I sell an appetizer, I average, let's say, $9 in profit, then how do you think I'm going to price the new item? I'm going to take the plate cost plus 9 and round up to the next half dollar to introduce it on the menu as being above average with its profitability. That way, I'm not compromising profit without recognizing it before it happened. And then the last thing, Edith, I would say here is remember, you cannot improve on anything that's not monitored and measured, and you cannot intentionally cost yourself profit without knowing it. So many times I like to go back and look at this report anywhere between, 30 to 90 days after making the changes to ensure the desired outcomes of what I would like for it to be.
Absolutely. That's a good point. Thank you. The next thing I want to show you guys is for anyone who has sort of multi-units or multiple locations, multi-concept, whatever it might be, we do also have our director functionality. So you can access that and you can see on my account, just in case you're not super familiar with Craftable, this is sort of the general configuration. We've got our different locations down here. And then we have this thing at the top called director, which is really that umbrella over the locations. We support all sorts of different configurations, but one thing you can do is you can actually control your items here at Director as well as recipes. If you have a singular POS in all your locations, you can do singular POS mapping up here that pushes down to all the locations. So it's really good to just sort of maintain guardrails and ensure that everyone's sort of meeting brand standards and you're really optimizing your time because you're doing everything in one place and pushing it down instead of needing to repeat the same things over and over for different locations. It also gives you that high level visibility across all of your locations because you've got a ton of reports available here. So you can see, just like I was looking at the store level, I can run all those reports up here at Director. So again, the one that I love that I want to show you what it looks like at the Director level is this actual versus theoretical COGS by ops group report. And we did just look at this one down at the store level as well. But what you can do when you run it up here is you can select multiple stores. You can again select date ranges. You can pick your ops groups, say whether you're doing gross or net sales, again, include the waste. You can also choose whether you're grouping it by store or by ops group. So it's a really neat way to see the comparison of those different ops groups, especially on the beverage side where you might have different ops groups. So it's fun to run it as like beer, wine, liquor, and a bev. With food, you're usually just looking at it as food. And we're just gonna click go and see what that looks like. So you can see here, it does a roll-up summary of all your locations to give you, again, that high-level comparison. So you can really know, hey, what locations do I need to drill into? You're not spending all your time going through each and every location and running all of their reports. You're running a high-level report at the top, checking the numbers, seeing, okay, in 12 South, we've actually got a very high variance between our actual and our theoretical. Let's go into 12 South and start drilling down and figuring out where this is coming from. What's going wrong? Did they miss something? Is our pricing off? Whatever it might be, it helps you align what you're doing and applying your time where it's most useful instead of kind of running around needing to figure out where should I even look. So that's available with our director module when you have multiple locations. It's a really great way to sort of get your finger on the pulse of how each location is doing. Separately, one other thing I did want to show you all is the books module on Craftable. So I know it's not terribly exciting necessarily unless you are involved in the accounting side of the system. But something people love about Craftable is how we deal with sort of the books and the AP side. So within Craftable, we'll sync into your AP system. Depending on what your AP type is, we bring in your chart of accounts, or you can import it if it's not brought in from your system. And then you can set something up called GL mappings, or your AP team would set this up for you depending on your business setup. So what this allows you to do is actually configure the rules and say, if something is in this category, then it gets this GL code. So it just makes it really automated. You can kind of get to a point where everything is going to come into books pre-GL coded based on all these rules you set. Because you can set it up as a really kind of broad, high level. Anything in the beer category gets cost of beer, or you can get really granular. Maybe I have a specific wine that should get my wine code because it's in the wine category, but normally we use it for cooking, so we're actually going to put it into cost of food. So you can really configure all of those rules, including exceptions to the generalized rules, by building them here as GL mappings. And then the net result of that is as you're approving invoices through your normal workflow within Craftable, your bills are getting created over here. They're getting auto GL coded. The pictures of your invoices are always attached as well, so your AP team can see it. And so it's really streamlining and saving time for your AP team by letting them just come in, click here. You can mass approve those bills, and then you can also mass sync them over to your AP system. So it really makes that AP workflow extremely fast. So it can really cut down on some of the labor time for your AP team so they can apply their time elsewhere. Or if you have an hourly person, it helps kind of cut down on some of those labor costs there as well. And of course, I'm sure you can run a ton of reports out of your AP system. So if you're using any of those reports, this will help make sure that you're keeping on top of your invoices flowing into AP. You're not waiting for the end of month for your accountant to say, hey, you spent too much. Your accountant should know because you're sending them invoices every day. They're syncing them to their AP system, hopefully every day, maybe every week. So you can really, again, make sure that you're keeping on top of everything. You're not overspending. You're purchasing the right purchase item, the right SKU, because you can see that data in Craftable and it's all visible and sort of top of mind for you within the platform. Those are just a couple ways we recommend using Craftable to really keep the finger on the pulse for your business, make sure that you're keeping your costs in line to make sure that you're really driving towards profit.
So when, and going back to the beginning, so we've seen our margins shrink significantly due to the impact of COVID. Okay, leaving us, many of us in a situation where we're scrambling to be profitable, if profitable at all. Okay, much of this is out of your control due to the cost of goods, cost of labor. Okay, but what we can do, like we talked about earlier, is we can slow down the game, pinpoint where the opportunities are, really measure the impact, and then work with the teams to actually drive the results. And so, by doing that, you're able to move your margins 1, 2, 3, 4 points pretty quickly by monitoring, measuring, and tracking these key parts of that prime cost. And remember, prime cost should sit 55 to 60, but unfortunately, it's now priced closer to 65 to 70. All right, reclaim those margins by identifying where is it at? Is it bev? Is it food? Where's the waste? Is it one item or is it 400 items? I can guarantee you it's probably only about 20 items driving that difference. How do we reclaim that? Don't try to balance it. Go focus where you can make the biggest impact. And I always like to say Craftable slows down the game. You look at it through a different lens and you focus on where the largest impact is and you drive results there, and that equals the profit that you're looking for in your bottom line.
Awesome. So thanks so much for joining, guys. We really appreciate your time. We did include a link if you do want to book in for a demo at all to see more about the platform. Our demos tend to be a lot more specific to your specific segment, what your business is like. So we do recommend if you've never done one before, definitely book in for a demo to see how Craftable can work for you and your business and your processes.